Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. In this update, we've got Francine continuing to gain strength in the Gulf of Mexico. At the same time, we've got high pressure that's been parked over a good part of the lower 48 with a lot of sinking air. So if we expand the view and take a look at the overall jet stream, I can show you what's happening here. Here is that ridge of high pressure that's been pretty much dominating a good part of the lower 48. That just has a lot of sinking air, a lot of dry air. So that dry air either heats up quickly or really cools quickly at night. And some of these, in fact, record low temperatures this morning across the Ohio Valley. But at the same time, that is helping to influence and strengthen this area of low pressure down there that's highlighted around Brownsville. That is Francine that will continue to get its act together, likely upgraded to a hurricane and making landfall into Louisiana as we head later on tomorrow afternoon into Wednesday night. If we take a look at some of these temperatures, real-time temperatures this morning across the east, you can definitely see, and even some of these were actually near or even record low temperatures this morning with widespread 40s and lower 50s showing up across a good part of Missouri and Illinois and Ohio, back into Kentucky, West Virginia. That was really pleasant, even fall-like air across that region. But if we head out west, where they've had all that ridge of high pressure, but that's a more of a heat dome high pressure, and those temperatures are pretty high considering even some of those mountain regions. Yeah, even Colorado is checking in at low 60s this morning. Even parts of Nebraska in the middle, even upper 60s, highlighted across that ridge of high pressure with very dry air associated with it. But here, where you can definitely see where it's not dry is down there into the Gulf of Mexico. You got crystal clear skies, right? I mean, under those ridging of high pressure. But yes, further to the south, that is where our low-level centers are starting to take shape and trying to compact. You can see there's a little dry slot. That's what's been kind of hindering Francine from strengthening it even further. But now it's taken that crucial from the northwest to the north turn, and then it will be turning northeast. Once it turns northeast, that's when I think it's going to be starting to gain strength to hurricane conditions, and likely going to continue to gain strength as it continues to take a beeline towards Louisiana as we head into tomorrow afternoon and conditions turn downhill very quickly. So if we take a look at the latest update from the National Hurricane Center, this is as of 7 a.m. There is that turn going north at 5 miles an hour. Currently has 65-mile-per-hour winds. Today is actually the peak of hurricane season, and traditionally on September the 10th, about 50% of the days we do have an active named hurricane somewhere out there in the Atlantic, and this is also going to be likely going to be upgraded to a hurricane by sometime today. So this is definitely peak city, so it's not unusual. We're seeing these storms likely starting to ramp up, and there's actually 2 more out there in the open waters of the Atlantic that will actually likely be named stormed as well pretty soon. But first and foremost, we're definitely concerned about the overall intensity and the shift in the track, which is actually going to be drifting a little bit further east. It's taken a noticeable bump eastward. Again, last update was about another 15 miles eastward. Now it puts the center somewhere in the vicinity between Lafayette and Morgan City, Louisiana, as we head into late tomorrow afternoon. If we kind of zoom in, you can see what we're talking about here. This is the city of Lake Charles. So don't let your guard down if you're outside of this cone, because this has been known to kind of wiggle back and forth. But nonetheless, right now, here is the center. There's the city of Lafayette, and you got Morgan City just to the right of here. So it's going to be somewhere in this vicinity that it's likely going to be making landfall as a bona fide Category 2, potentially even maybe stronger as this starts to really start to intensify later on this afternoon into tomorrow. But even heading all the way into New Orleans, we've got hurricane watches in place as of right now, and storm surge is going to be a huge factor of 5 to 10 feet across those regions. So if we expand the view, you can see what's happening this morning. we've got a lot of dry air mass further to the north, right? There's really not much going on, and most of the rest of the lower 48, most of the action is further south. And where this low pressure center is, and it's only moving at 5 miles an hour, right on the cusp of there, which is Brownsville, they actually have a flash flood warning. They're getting the outer bands of Francine right now. Some of those areas have already picked up 3 to 5 inches of torrential rains this morning as it's basically crawling just off the coast. You've got tropical storm force watches off there for the Texas coast. You can see the outer bands are just off the coast in the open waters. But once this gets inland, we're already getting the outer bands into Louisiana, and that's only going to be taking a downhill turn as we get closer. So if we look at the overall peak surge of what we're talking about a 1 to 3 foot surge along the Texas coast. But once you get into southeast Texas and especially into Louisiana, we're talking 5 to 10 feet of storm surge, and then you dump all the heavy rain of likely another 5 to 8 inches of heavy rain, and then you combine the wind with that. So we're likely taking conditions going downhill very quickly. And you remember what happened with Houston. We had up to 2.5 million people without power at one point. So yes, power outages is a huge concern with tropical systems, not just power outages, but also tornadoes. And with the expansion and the more intensity, and as this continues to shift further east, it's putting the placement of the potential tornadoes further east as well. So now we're talking not just the Lake Charles vicinity, the Lafayette area, Morgan City, all the way into New Orleans, getting into Gulfport, into Mobile. Yes, even you guys in Pensacola and Destin have to be concerned about potential inland tornadoes as this comes ashore and as it makes landfall during the day on Wednesday into Wednesday night, and that will continue to lift further north. So if we expand the view and take a look at some of the overall wind gusts of what we're talking about on the latest high resolution guidance, I'm not really concerned about winds highlighted across the Texas coast. You're mainly going to get a glancing blow from this from the outer bands, but all the heavier wind gusts are more or less going to be compacted right around where that cone is, and especially in the middle of the cone and the right front quadrant of the cone, which is known as the dirty side of the cone. That's where you're going to have the most intense winds and the most intense storm surge across central Louisiana, and then moving up into Mississippi and likely ending up decreasing by the time we head into western Tennessee later in the day on Thursday. But overall, here's what your additional rain amounts. Yes, they've already got about 3 to 5 inches there into Brownsville. They're looking at maybe another 1 inch. But yes, you can definitely see even the Texas coastline kind of misses out on even most of the rain. So at most, you might pick up 1 inch just right along the coast and just sporadic amounts in southeast Texas. But yes, you just get crushed with very heavy rainfall into central Louisiana of upwards to 5 to 8 inches, even some isolated 10 inches amounts. It's definitely not off the table. And as this gets stronger, likely anticipate a little bit further east bump before it actually makes landfall. So if I lived in New Orleans, I would definitely be on high alert from this system as it gets closer and closer to that right front quadrant kind of bullseye, if you will, be having more of the dirty side of the storm impact that region with a higher storm surge, and that will continue to lift up into Mississippi and getting into portions of Alabama and eventually heading into portions of Tennessee. But if we expand it even into Florida, yeah, you can't let your guard down into the Florida Panhandle. You're still going to get some flooding rains with flash flood watches in place for across this region. So yes, even though you're definitely outside of the cone, you're still going to get a lot of impacts from this system because you're on the right side of this overall storm track as this comes ashore. But by the time we head into late Thursday, heading into Friday, I think most of all the action is done in Louisiana. You'll likely have to be dealing with widespread power outages in the recovery by then, as most of the storm will be inundated, although weakening by then as likely a tropical depression heading up in northern portions of Arkansas, getting into Missouri, and eventually heading into Illinois. And it will likely start to slow down, if you will. And what that does, that will also help influence and enhance the flood potential. So yeah, we could still have a kind of a bona fide area of a low pressure still as a tropical depression, even as it gets up into Missouri and southern portions of Illinois. And definitely as it slows down, will definitely enhance the rainfall aspect with this system. But what's going to happen is we've got that ridge of high pressure that's pretty much been parked over a good part of the West Coast is going to be slowly shifting eastbound. So yeah, as it does, you always have it sinking air. So if you're on the dry slot of that storm, basically the west side of the storm, you're on the dry slot, the sinking air side. So once the storm moves out, that allows the temperatures to heat up fairly quickly across the middle part of the country. And you're going to be watching those temperatures soar big time, as we'll be watching those 10 to 15 degrees above average temperatures, really highlighting those temperatures go back to pretty much summertime for a good part of the lower 48, while you slowly tried to get a little reprieve there with the temperatures entering the West Coast. So if we look at the overall jet stream, by the time we head into this weekend, on Sunday, we more or less have a zonal flow parked over a good part of the lower 48 by then. A zonal flow is usually a warm flow coming off the Pacific, while at the same time we're watching another fairly significant trough that will be diving in off the West Coast. That bit, by the time we get into early next week, it will be impacting the West Coast, and those temperatures will start to drop. But look at the temperatures, what's happening on Sunday with the zonal flow parked over a good part of the lower 48. Yeah, that's not a misprint, folks. This is not what you want to see, especially after the little cool down that you had for many parts of the country. Is triple digit temperatures likely trying to return for portions of Texas and Oklahoma. But yes, unfortunately, they are coming back. And even widespread 80s and even some 90s showing up on the map across the central U.S. Even eastern Colorado will be approaching 90 degrees. Even those areas into Minnesota, into Wisconsin, well into the 80s. So yes, I mean, summer is definitely not done as of yet. But the good thing is, as we head into next week, yes, for those areas that have been baking on the triple digit temperatures for a while now, are finally going to get a little bit of reprieve with much cooler air with that trough really coming in. And yes, unfortunately for much of Wyoming, Colorado, getting into New Mexico, much of Texas and Nebraska, much of Missouri, all these areas highlighted in red will be under the ridge of high pressure in those well above average warm, if not almost hot conditions for, middle of September standards by now. And if we break it down, the precipitation over the next 7 days, with more or less ridging of high pressure and a lot of sinking air highlighted across a good part of the lower 48, you got much of the country under pretty much clear skies. There's not much happening under those under that either heat or the cold that will be replaced by the warm temperatures. Most of the action is going to be highlighted across what does Francine unfold, with obviously some flooding rains across Louisiana, back into Mississippi, along the coastal regions into Alabama, and back into the Florida Panhandle, and then likely where it's kind of stalls and definitely slows down across northern Arkansas, western Tennessee, southeastern portions of Missouri, southern Illinois this weekend, or heading into Friday and this weekend. Yes, they could be looking at some very heavy rainfall coming back into the picture by then. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update. Why I protect you before and after the storm.